Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hasquin, and I'm back with another thing you should know by being alive. And in this episode, I want to cover the Supreme Court case Korematsu v. United States from 1944. I want to look at the context of the case, what happened, the Supreme Court's decision, look at the dissent in this decision, and then its long-term legacy, the case's long-term legacy. So let's start looking at this. So this revolves around World War II and Japanese-American internment. So after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941, the United States entered World War II. And fear of espionage and sabotage on the West Coast led President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to issue Executive Order 9066 in 1942. Now, this order authorized United States military to create exclusion zones and to forcibly remove Japanese Americans from their homes. That meant placing over 120,000 people, most of them American citizens, into internment camps. So, let's look at the first half of the case. Who was Fred Korematsu? He was a U.S. citizen. He was born in California to Japanese immigrants. And when ordered for relocation, he refused to leave his home and his job. He argued that the order violated his constitutional rights. And Korematsu, he was arrested, he was convicted, and he appealed his case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So, let's look at some of the key legal questions here. What was the central question? Well, did the government's exclusion and internment of Japanese Americans violate the Fifth Amendment's guarantee of due process and equal protection under the law? The government argued that it was necessary at the time for national security during wartime. Korematsu's lawyers argued that it was racial discrimination and it was wholly unconstitutional. So, as it was presented, we get to 1944, and the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision that the exclusion order was constitutional. Justice Hugo Black, who wrote for the majority, stated that while racial classifications are suspect, in this particular case, the need to protect against espionage outweighed Korematsu's individual rights. Now, the court claimed that it wasn't about racial prejudice, but instead it was about military necessity. There were 3 justices who dissented very strongly against the majority opinion. Justice Frank Murphy called the decision the legalization of racism. Justice Robert Jackson warned it would become a loaded weapon for future abuse of power. And Justice Owen Roberts argued that there was no evidence of individual wrongdoing by Korematsu. And so the dissenting opinions here highlighted the deep flaws in the majority's reasoning. So, the impact, the legacy here, right? So Korematsu v. United States became infamous as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in American history. It upheld the government's power to violate individual rights based on race under the guise of national security. In 1983, Korematsu's conviction was overturned in a federal court through a writ of coram nobis, and this acknowledged that the government misconduct here and also suppressing of evidence took place during the original case. Then the formal denouncement of the case took place in 2018 during the case Trump v. Hawaii. In this case, Chief Justice John Roberts stated that Korematsu was gravely wrong the day it was decided and has no place in law. So while the Supreme Court did not officially overturn Korematsu, this statement signaled the court's rejection of the case's precedent. Fred Korematsu spent his life fighting for civil liberties, reminding us that protecting national security should never come at the cost of constitutional rights. So, wrapping this up here real quick, Korematsu v. United States reminds us that fear can lead to injustice, and protecting rights during crisis is essential to democracy. If you picked up anything new today, if you learned something new, piqued your interest, throw me a like, a comment, a follow, a share, something like that, for more things that you should know by being alive. Because cases like Korematsu teach us to stay vigilant in defending civil liberties. Thanks for taking the time to watch.